A baby's cry cut through the silence of the mansion like a siren, a sharp sound of helplessness that had been echoing through the marble corridors for over 3 hours. Downstairs, Hope Morales, a 24-year-old housekeeper, wiped the same square foot of floor for the 4th time, a tightness in her chest. That incessant crying was stirring something recent and deep within her. Upstairs, little Theo, just 2 months old, was alone in his crib, his face red and swollen. The expensive nanny, Camilla, had disappeared, and the bottle next to the child smelled of sour milk. In his office, the father, Rafael Mendoza, a 32-year-old widower, tried to focus on a virtual meeting, pretending to ignore the sound that accused him. The crying grew weaker, more dangerous, until it became an almost inaudible whimper. That was what broke Hope's resistance. She dropped everything and ran up the stairs, her chest tight with a bad feeling. When she opened the nursery door, the scene shocked her. The baby was almost limp, his skin feverish, his little eyes half closed. With an urgency that came from her soul, she lifted him into her arms. Theo was hot, dehydrated, and instinctively began to search for food on her chest, a desperate movement from someone on the edge of life. In that moment, Hope's personal pain and the baby's suffering merged into a single point of unbearable agony. Something inside her exploded. Just 6 weeks earlier, she had lost her own newborn son, and her body still carried the grief in the form of milk she had no one to give to. Seeing Theo suffering, reliving the helplessness that haunted her nightmares, was too much to bear. Without thinking, without calculating the consequences, moved only by an overwhelming maternal instinct, she sat in the armchair, settled the baby in her lap, and offered him her breast. Theo stopped crying instantly, latching onto that source of life with the strength of a survivor. At that moment, the bedroom door opened. It was Raphael who, upon seeing the scene, froze, disbelief and anger mixing on his face. An act of compassion or an unforgivable violation. The lives of 3 people are about to change forever. If this scene shocked you and left you curious, subscribe to the channel and like this video to discover the consequences of this powerful moment. Rafael Mendoza's mansion was a house in mourning, just like Hope's heart. 2 months prior, Rafael had lost his wife Valentina to complications in childbirth, a tragedy that turned the joy of Theo's arrival into a constant painful reminder of her absence. Unable to face the crib without feeling the weight of loss, he took refuge in his work, outsourcing his son's care, managing his pain with the same cold efficiency with which he ran his business. He didn't know it, but the new housekeeper he had hired carried a grief that mirrored his own. 6 weeks before setting foot in that house, Hope had buried her own newborn son, a brief life lost to a medical negligence that would haunt her forever. As if the loss of a child weren't a devastating enough storm, Hope had to face a second shipwreck. The man she loved, her husband, instead of being her safe harbor, blamed her for the tragedy. With a cruelty that defied reason, he called her weak, said she didn't know how to handle the pregnancy, and abandoned her in the midst of her deepest pain. Overnight, she found herself alone, without a child, without a husband, and without money. The job at Raphael's mansion wasn't a career choice, but a lifeboat, the only lifeline in an ocean of despair that threatened to drown her. She arrived there to clean up other people's messes, while desperately trying not to fall apart from her own. From the first day, Hope felt a silent connection with little Theo. In that baby who had also lost his mother, she saw a reflection of her own orphanhood. As she cleaned the silent rooms, her eyes followed the neglect of the nanny, Camilla, the way the bottle was left. Forgotten, how the boy's cries were ignored. She saw the pain in Raphael's eyes when he looked at his son, the same pain she felt when she looked at an empty crib. Theo's crying wasn't just an annoying noise to her. It was the echo of her own loss, a desperate call that activated the only thing she had left. Her maternal instinct, a dormant force desperately waiting for a reason to awaken. Raphael's voice cut through the peace of the room like a fire alarm. What the hell is going on in here? Hope jumped, her heart racing, and instinctively tried to cover herself while protecting the sleeping baby. The words tumbled out of her mouth, a torrent of explanations about the missing nanny, the spoiled milk, the incessant crying. But Raphael didn't hear the logic. He only saw the transgression. The housekeeper, a stranger, in an act of unimaginable intimacy with his son. His mind, conditioned by social boundaries and paralyzed by his own grief, registered the scene as a profound violation. "Have you lost your mind?" he shouted, advancing into the room, his face a mask of fury. He was about to continue, to fire her, to throw her out, but something stopped him mid-sentence. It was the sight of his son. Theo wasn't crying. For the first time in his 2 months of life, he was sleeping a deep and serene sleep in someone's arms, a small, satisfied smile on his lips. For 60 days, that baby had been a bundle of tension and tears, a constant reminder of Raphael's inability to soothe him. And now, there he was, at peace. The image was such a powerful contradiction that it dismantled Raphael's anger, leaving in its place a bewildered confusion. "How?" he whispered, the fury dissipating. "How is he so quiet?" Seeing the change in his tone, Hope explained more calmly, her voice still trembling. She spoke of the hours of crying, the spoiled bottle, the baby's desperation for food. Raphael, now looking at his son instead of her, absorbed the information. But the logical question, the one that challenged the rules of the world, remained. "But you, how did you—" He couldn't finish the sentence. Hope understood. She lowered her head, and the confession that would change everything between them came as a breath of pain. "I lost my son 6 weeks ago, sir." The sentence hit Raphael with the force of a punch. The pain, the same pain. In that instant, she was no longer the housekeeper. She became a mirror of his own hell. Raphael felt the floor disappear. Anger, gratitude, empathy, it all swirled into an emotional vortex that left him get-actionless. The situation was too intimate and complex to be solved with an order or a dismissal. He needed time. "Go home, Hope," he said, his voice exhausted. "We'll talk tomorrow." With infinite care, she transferred the sleeping baby to the father's arms. Theo didn't even stir. "Just don't let him get hungry again," she whispered. And she left, trembling, unsure of her future, but without a shred of regret. Raphael was left alone, holding his peaceful son for the first time, a bewildering gratitude warring with his confusion. The next day, the nanny, Camilla, returned from her emergency, expecting to find the house in chaos and a desperate boss, which would only reinforce her importance. Instead, she found a disconcerting peace. She saw Theo smiling in his father's lap, a scene that filled her not with relief, but with a cold envy. Her job was easy and well paid, precisely because the baby was difficult, and the father was absent. Their happiness was a direct threat to her comfortable lifestyle. Moved by a venomous curiosity, she went to the kitchen to probe the head housekeeper, Carmen, a good-hearted woman who told her with admiration about Hope's act of compassion. But Camilla didn't hear a story of heroism. In her calculating mind, Hope's story was rewritten. She didn't see a grieving mother saving a starving baby. She saw a competitor, an unstable woman who, after losing her own child, had developed a dangerous obsession with her bosses. The act of breastfeeding, which for the housekeeper was a miracle of generosity, for Camilla was proof of a transgression, a violation of boundaries she could use to her advantage. She saw the perfect opportunity to get rid of Hope, eliminating the only person who seemed to have the power to calm the baby and consequently diminish Raphael's dependence on her own services. The seed of malice was planted, watered by envy. In a voice filled with false concern, Camilla made a phone call to Patricia Montalvo, the biggest socialite and gossip in the wealthy neighborhood. Darling, I have to tell you something awful that's happening at Raphael's house, she whispered into the phone. And then she poured her poison, telling a distorted version of the story, painting Hope as an unhinged and opportunistic woman. She's obsessed with the baby, Patricia. Yesterday I caught her breastfeeding him. I'm sure she's trying to seduce Raphael to take advantage of his vulnerability to take the late Valentina's place. The gossip, juicy and scandalous, found fertile ground. The gears of social judgment began to turn, and a storm of prejudice was brewing, about to break over the unsuspecting Hope. The poison of gossip spread with the speed of a plague. The phone in Raphael's mansion wouldn't stop ringing, and each call was a new blow to his already fragile confidence. It was his late wife's friends, the neighbors, even his mother-in-law, all reciting the same script poisoned by Camilla. They spoke of protecting Valentina's memory, of looking out for Theo's well-being, of how a grieving woman like Hope was unstable and opportunistic. The words were a coordinated assault, designed to exploit Raphael's guilt, to make him question the only good thing that had happened in his house in months, turning an act of love into a sordid conspiracy. Raphael found himself trapped in a battlefield between two opposing realities. On one side, the evidence of his own eyes. His son, once listless and crying, now smiled, babbled, and followed Hope with a look of pure adoration. Theo was, undeniably, happier and healthier than ever. On the other side, there was the deafening judgment of his social circle, a chorus of voices accusing him of being naive, weak, and disrespectful to his wife's memory. The wound of Valentina's death, which he believed was caused by negligence, was still open, and the fear of making another mistake, of failing to protect his family again, paralyzed him. It was the nanny, Camilla, who delivered the coup de grâce. With a performance of loyalty and concern, she approached Raphael. "Sir, Hope asked to stay later today. She said Theo needs her to sleep well." She paused, planting the doubt. "I found it a bit strange. She's not his mother, is she? But sometimes she acts as if she is." The insinuation was subtle but lethal. It framed Hope's love not as a gift, but as an appropriation, an obsession. For Raphael, already besieged by external pressure, that observation from inside the house was the confirmation he needed to validate his worst fears. That night, Raphael didn't sleep. He replayed the scene in his mind. Hope, a stranger, breastfeeding his son, and he heard the voices. Obsession, opportunist, for Theo's sake. The image of his son smiling began to be overshadowed by the fear of scandal, by the dread of being deceived again. The pressure of the world became stronger than the truth he saw in his own home, and then he made his decision. To protect his wife's memory, to silence the voices, to do what the world expected of him, he would do the unthinkable. He would silence the only person who had brought joy back into his son's life. The pressure of the world is about to destroy a pure bond. Will he really make this terrible mistake? If you've ever felt judged by people who didn't understand your reality, share your story in the comments and subscribe to the channel, because Hope's journey is far from over. The next morning, after a sleepless night, Richard came downstairs with the bitter decision weighing on his soul. And fate, in its cruel irony, greeted him with the happiest scene he had ever witnessed in his home. Hope was on the living room rug, playing with Theo, and the baby was laughing out loud, a pure, strong sound, a melody of joy that filled the mansion. For a moment, Richard's resolve wavered. The truth was right there in front of him, laughing and gurgling, contradicting all the lies he had been told. But then the phone rang. It was another venomous voice, another concerned socialite. The pressure of the outside world invaded his home again, and he, mistaking weakness for responsibility, hardened his heart and chose to obey his fear. The cold formality of his office was a barrier between them. Hope entered, her smile still on her face, and found a boss she didn't recognize. Richard wouldn't look her in the eye. He repeated the gossip as if it were a verdict, the dirty words sounding even more terrible in his mouth. "People think you're taking advantage of my grief," he said. "They think that because you lost your son, you're now trying to steal mine." The accusation was a brutality, a desecration of her most sacred pain, using her grief as a weapon to accuse her. The color drained from Hope's face, shock and pain leaving her breathless, unable to defend herself against such surreal malice. "You breastfed him?" "Hope, without my permission," he continued, his voice distant as if reading a report. "Your affection has become inappropriate and is causing problems." And then he delivered the sentence, the two words that would destroy the small world of peace she had found. "You're fired." The silence that followed was filled only by the frantic beating of Hope's heart. To seal his cruelty, he added, "And don't expect a letter of recommendation." He wasn't just dismissing her, he was condemning her, ensuring that doors would be closed to her, punishing her act of love with professional and social exile. She had saved his son, and her payment was annihilation. With her last strength, she made a single request, her voice a whisper. "Please, just let me kiss Theo goodbye." "No," Richard replied, turning his back to her, unable to face the pain he was causing. "It's better if you leave now." And she left. As Hope walked out of the mansion, the sky broke open in a sudden, violent storm, as if nature itself were weeping for the injustice. From his office window, Richard watched her, a solitary, shrinking figure being swallowed by the rain, carrying only a plastic bag. And the moment she disappeared, a new sound rose from upstairs, the inconsolable cry of his son. The silence had been broken, and the pain was back. Hope's exile began with the rain and continued under the cruel sun of indifference. In the days that followed her dismissal, she looked for work with what energy she had left, but at every door the same fatal question: "Do you have a recommendation from your last employer?" Raphael's silence on the phone was a guilty verdict, a stain that made her unemployable. The little money she had ran out, and soon she was evicted from the small room she rented. With her belongings in a single plastic bag, she found herself, for the first time, without a roof over her head. The woman who had brought life and warmth to a mansion was now completely homeless, an anonymous face in the crowd, facing the concrete jungle with no weapons. Meanwhile, the mansion had transformed into an inferno of sound and pain. Without hope, Theo regressed into a state of continuous despair. His crying, now sharper and more inconsolable, echoed day and night, a lament that neither luxury nor the best professionals could silence. Raphael, in a panic, hired the most expensive and experienced nannies in the city, one after another. But they all failed. The baby rejected them, refused the bottle, his small body writhing in an agony no one understood. "This child is suffering from a deep trauma," the last one said before quitting. Raphael watched, helpless, as his son faded away, the smile he had barely had time to know, now a distant, painful memory. Life on the streets taught Hope lessons she never wanted to learn. The nights were a terror of cold and fear, sleeping on park benches, using newspapers as a blanket. She met the unexpected kindness of other homeless people who taught her the survival codes of the invisible city. But the physical cost was immense. She grew thin, her clothes became ragged, and exhaustion became her constant companion. The deepest pain, however, was the betrayal of her own body, which still produced milk, a cruel reminder of the son she lost and the baby she was forced to abandon. Theo's name was a whisper in her lonely nights, a love that both warmed and tortured her. The crisis at the mansion reached its peak. Theo, losing weight dangerously, was hospitalized. The pediatrician's verdict was a final blow to Raphael's conscience. "Physically, there's nothing wrong with him," the doctor said. "The problem is emotional. He's giving in to sadness, Raphael. Babies can die from this." And then came the question he could no longer avoid. Was there a recent loss of a primary attachment figure, someone who was the center of his world? Faced with the question, Raphael could no longer hide behind his pride or fear. The truth came out, a whisper of guilt. I fired his caregiver. The doctor's gaze was the mirror that finally showed Raphael the scale of his mistake. Returning to the silent mansion, now without even the sound of his son's crying, Raphael fell apart. Theo's absence was more terrifying than his pain. He walked through the baby's empty room and found a small toy Hope had left behind. As he picked it up, the dam of his denial broke. He understood, with devastating clarity, the monstrosity of his act. He hadn't just fired an employee, he had ripped away his son's only source of love and security. He had sacrificed his son's happiness on the altar of public opinion, and the price of that mistake could be his own son's life. Raphael's transformation began there, at the bottom of the pit of his regret. Driven by a guilt that consumed him, Raphael launched a desperate search for hope. The man who once lived in an ivory tower now walked the most forgotten corners of the city. Shelters, soup kitchens, dark alleys. He showed her photo, taken from security footage, to anonymous faces he would have never noticed before. Each day of the search was a lesson in humility. He, who had judged Hope so easily, now saw the harsh reality of invisibility up close. The search for her became a journey to find his own lost humanity, an act of penance on the streets he had, for so long, chosen to ignore. After 10 fruitless days, when hope was almost gone, a phone call led him to an underpass in the city center. There, in a makeshift camp, he found her. Hope was unrecognizable, thin, frail, and burning with fever. With infinite care, he lifted her into his arms and took her to the same hospital where his son was fading. 3 days later, when her infection was under control, he took her in a wheelchair to Theo's room. The moment she whispered, "Hello, my love," the baby, who had been listless for weeks, opened his eyes, recognized her voice, and for the first time since she left, he smiled. The reunion was a silent miracle. With Theo visibly recovering with every hour he spent by her side, Raphael made his plea. "Hope, please come home. Not as my employee. Come back as Theo's mother. Come back to be our family." She looked at him, the pain of betrayal still present in her eyes. "I will come back," she said, "but for Theo. And you, Raphael, will have to earn back my trust every single day, from scratch." It wasn't a fairy tale ending with instant forgiveness. It was the beginning of a slow, difficult reconstruction, a new contract based not on a salary, but on the promise of a second chance. And for Raphael, that was the only penance that mattered. The months that followed transformed the mansion. The silence was replaced by the laughter of a healthy baby and the careful interaction of 2 adults learning to trust again. Raphael learned to be a father, and Hope slowly learned to forgive. Together, they became the family Theo needed, an unlikely family, born from pain and error, for they learned that a home is not built on the absence of faults, but on the courage to fix them, and that the strongest love sometimes is not the one born from perfection, but the one that is stubbornly reborn from the ashes of suffering. A story about forgiveness, second chances, and the healing power of love. If the journey of Raphael, Hope, and Theo has touched your heart, subscribe, like, and comment where you're watching from. Let's celebrate the families that, even through the greatest difficulties, find a way back to each other.